Welcome to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast. I'm your host, Craig Nash, Senior Editor at Good Faith Media. Each episode, we explore and discuss the weekly texts and lessons found in Good Faith magazine. For the July, August, and September 2026 installment of the Bible Studies, I'll be inviting special guests to join me in sharing our thoughts and ideas about the passage and ways small groups might approach each week's lesson. We are glad you're here, so let's dive in. This week's passage is from Luke chapter 14, verses 1 through 24. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat at the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. Jesus asked the Pharisee and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you might have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those that exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Then Jesus said to the host, "When you give a luncheon or dinner, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and so you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' And another said, 'I had just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the towns and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" So this passage is one of those parables where there's actually an event that happens that kind of sets up the parable. And as Mary Alice reminded us in the lesson, and it was a great reminder for me, this is the third time in Luke that Luke has been invited to a Pharisee's house. So Luke seems to be doing something here by arranging these passages throughout the book. There's a lot going on in this passage. It's really kind of in a couple of parts. There's kind of 2 lanes to this parable. One is addressing what you should do if you're invited to a banquet. Another is what you should do if you were hosting one. And this story was set up by a question Jesus asked about the lawfulness of healing on the Sabbath, which again, like last week, it felt a little disjointed, but Jesus seems to often just kind of take these events as like springboards into a larger conversation that might start with the thing, but ends up being about the thing behind the thing. And all of this seems to be about status, ultimately status in the kingdom of God. And when we return, we'll talk about ways that you can address this passage with your small groups. I am happy for this lesson, again, to have Andie Pellicer, who is my pastor here at University Baptist Church in Waco, Texas. Andie, welcome again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the last lesson. Well, we have good. This is good. We do good together.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So as we talked off mic, there's a lot more going on here. It feels like than the week before. So what are some of those things that just kind of strike you? There's a lot of them.
There are a lot. I find it hilarious that Jesus takes the thing that's under the thing, like you were talking about. Um, you have this group of people and they're so consumed by the way they're being viewed. And Jesus said, "Okay, well, I'll just go with that. Hey, you don't want to look foolish in front of your friends, so stop doing this thing." And I love that Jesus does that, especially in the parables in Luke, but throughout the Gospels, where he gets at the heart of somebody and he's like, if this is the only way I can get your attention, I will do that. And then moves into, this could be a character issue though. And what would you do
Like the
about that?
question he asked about on the Sabbath, if your child are an ox. I thought that was funny that you
Yes.
put your child in an ox and saying fell in a crevasse, or I can't remember the exact.
Yep.
What would you do?
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't really. Luke doesn't talk about how they respond. Jesus just kind of goes into the banquet
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. And I do wonder if the connection there is because a Pharisee sitting there or any of the guests, I wonder if they would say, well, I mean, of course I would rescue my child, or, of course I would rescue my oxen. And the perception of, well, I wouldn't want to break the Sabbath might have been the problem to begin with. And so here we have this, this ongoing dynamic where Jesus is saying, okay, you are so consumed by looking like you're doing the right thing. And it's for the wrong reasons. But again, I'm willing to work with that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking this is helping me connect the spark that started the story. This Pharisee is consumed with doing the right things, but
Hmm.
Jesus is really pointing out you're really actually consumed with who's in and who's out.
That's right.
Yeah, this thing about working on the Sabbath isn't about working on the Sabbath. It's
Right.
about who meets your standards.
That's right. And the free pass that they give themselves
Yeah,
and that we continue to give ourselves. We will hold somebody to a standard that we ourselves can't or aren't willing to meet. And somehow that still maintains a power dynamic.
yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I particularly appreciate about what Mary Alice was bringing to light was the story of the little girl who got invited to church.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just gut wrenching, and I related in some degree when I moved in. So I grew up in Alaska, moved to Washington, but stayed with my grandparents while we were remodeling a house. And I wanted to go to church, and my mom said, "You don't have church clothes," not because we couldn't afford it. That's a very different reason, but because I, played hard and was kind of a tomboy. And my grandma kept saying, "It doesn't matter what she's wearing."
Hmm.
And as a family who didn't attend church together while I was growing up, but my grandparents did, I think that my grandma understood something that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily understand. And that is when we bring character before Jesus, that's what matters. And this little girl, the context of she was wearing her best.
Yeah.
Once again, we're in this realm of perception.
Yeah, that's so great. When you talked about growing up in Washington, kind of an insider outsider, my thought was the Brandy Carlisle baptism story. Do you know that
Yes, I
story?
do.
Yeah, so our audience needs to know this. So Brandy Carlisle, an incredible singer-songwriter, she labels herself a hippie Jesus freak.
Hmm.
She talks about how much she still loves reading Brennan Manning, but her story is Brennan Manning, the author of Ragamuffin
Hmm.
Gospel, who wrote about wide open tables and
Yes.
the misfits in God's kingdom. And her story is she started going to church as a teenager, 15, 16 years old. This is kind of weird language to use once you're deconstructing,
Mhm.
but this is the language she uses. I fell in love with this person called Jesus, and decided she wanted to be baptized. And her youth minister, she went through the baptism class, and well, Brandy Carlisle was and is gay,
Mhm.
and had this whole moment where her whole family had come. I think she had family come from out of town to see her baptism. There were a couple of people being baptized. The day that she was ready to be baptized, the youth minister addressed, "Are you gay?"
Right.
And her response is, hearing her tell it now as opposed to like hearing her tell it 20 years ago is interesting, because she gives him a lot more grace now.
Mhm.
But she said, "You know me."
Yes.
Like,
Right.
you've known this. And
Yes.
she talks about how she has this line in her book. This is extending grace to him, saying, And she had a whole album where it was all about forgiving him.
Yes.
It's called By the Way, I Forgive You.
Mm.
And her line is, I just feel like he ran out of time.
Yes. Yes.
But interestingly, a lot of Brandi Carlile's music is about a big table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about, so my favorite communion metaphor, my thoughts around communion actually came from Rachel Held Evans, an author who passed away very tragically.
Yeah, we've quoted Rachel Held Evans
yes
on this
podcast. I love that. She was on a podcast where I heard her say that the table, the Lord's table, is the great equalizer. And the podcast host pushed back and was like, okay, would you eat communion with this person? Would you take communion with this person? Would you eat communion with someone who murdered somebody?
Yeah.
And I mean, those are incredibly extreme examples. And her response was, none of us are more or less worthy to come before the table. And I grieve the moments where people create barriers to understanding that, in this parable particularly, if we're connecting Jesus with the one hosting is this deeply intimate thing.
Yeah.
I just had a bunch of people over and I texted and said, hey, reminder, I'm inviting you. You don't have to bring something, but you can if you'd like. I would love to know your preferences, your food allergies. And then you go about the business of creating a space that makes someone feel known and seen.
Mm-hmm.
And those barriers that we say, well, this table is not for you, until that precludes being seen and known. And if Jesus really is the host, he's going to the people that nobody wanted to know or see. I mean, the people in the outskirts of the city, the people in poverty, the people who were not necessarily included in regular life.
And the Pharisee.
The Pharisee.
That's kind of the end of this, is like, you were all invited. Everyone was invited.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of I think the scandal of the gospel. In a nutshell. It's the story of Jonah. It's like who belongs, who is worthy of God's grace.
Yeah.
So there's like a million ways a Sunday school class or a small group could talk about this. I think one great question would be, who's the person, maybe not name the person, but who's the type of person that even you, if you're a preacher of a wide table, would have a really hard time inviting.
Absolutely.
The politician.
That's right.
The banker. The person who thinks differently about sexuality or whatever from you.
Yeah. And I think with that, who is the person that if nobody was watching, you might not connect with? I mean, I think about people that I've experienced throughout my time in ministry and just, being a human in the world, people who really, for circumstances either within or outside of their control, are kind of draining or taxing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think about, do I have within me the genuine desire to set not just a place for them, but a place next to me that is about them and not about me. I do have a book recommendation if you're interested. So there's a great book called Dangerous Wonder by Mike Yaconelli.
Oh, yeah.
And
I don't know the book, but I'm familiar with his work.
It's fantastic, particularly because it talks about when we get close enough to the work of God, there's this the butterflies in your stomach and your heart is racing. And I think creating bigger tables is the very crux of the heart of God. And I think that would be a really interesting kind of side quest to read that together.
I was just reading the last verse of this passage, which I think is the heart of it, which is, it's really just speaks to the extravagance of God. It's, then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come so that my house will be full. We could get into ideas of, heaven, hell, salvation, kingdom here. Like the purpose of this is not just that people will be included, but that the house will be full.
Yes.
Which is kind of like a more over the top thing than just a wide table that a lot of people
absolutely.
Yeah. So, wonderful conversation. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to next week's episode. I'm Craig Nash, and you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media. Our music comes from Pond 5. If you are not already a subscriber to Good Faith Magazine, Learn more about how you can receive a copy of the magazine and Bible study curriculum at goodfaithmedia.org.